Ah! While the ancient world used brutal methods of torture, the modern world has none of those torture methods. Over the centuries, behind the scenes of torture and human ruthlessness, horror stories have been told of the sadistic pleasure derived from terrifying others with suffering. In today's video, let's talk about the cruel methods of killing people and the brutal methods of torture in the ancient world. Before going to the video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon. Now we are talking about getting bitten by rats. One of the worst forms of punishment is torture. The thing about rats is that they will eat anything. Thus, it is not surprising that the people of the ancient world made a torture device out of them. Typically, a rat is placed in a small cage positioned against the victim's abdomen. The rat becomes agitated when the outside of the cage is heated either by a candle, a burning stick, or hot coals. So, how can it be avoided? By penetrating human skin, the only soft surface available. Very quickly, the rat bites the victim's stomach and crawls into the intestines. This process causes unbearable pain. This method effectively obtains information from prisoners. During the real-life 7th century Dutch revolt, the Dutch leader Diederik Sanai tortured prisoners. Between 1964 and 1990, the South American military dictatorships of Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay used this system. Next, we will talk about stretching the body with a torture device. Another brutally famous torture device in the ancient world was the rack. It usually involved a wooden table with axes and levers on either side. The victim is forced to lie on the ground, and then his wrists and heels are tied with leather straps. Chains or ropes were attached to the belts, which caused wounds on the skin. One or more torturers slowly pushed levers that caused the wooden circle to spin, pulling the prisoner's body from side to side. Because of this, the muscles in the inner body can be torn, the spine expands, and the posture changes due to loosening of the joints. The pressure on the lungs is unimaginable. Due to this, the heart stops and death occurs in severe pain. In some cases, the body splits into two. In real life, in 1447, British Constable John Exeter used the rack to torture prisoners in the Tower of London. And in BC. In 356, the Greeks used this device to torture Herostratus, a Greek arsonist who burned down the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Now let's talk about a torture done by being tied to the wheel. This is an unbearable means of torture. This method can also be known as the operating wheel, breaking wheel, or Catherine wheel. Widely used in the ancient world, this method was reserved for public executions. There were variations in the type used here, but generally, the prisoner was tied to a large, wooden spoked wheel, and the goal was not to kill them, but to severely mutilate them. The executioner begins this by breaking bones and beating the victim close to death. Crush all their bones and kill them. Or horribly mutilated, the prisoner is placed on the wheel and nailed to the back of their heel and neck to bleed to death. In real life, in 1348, a Jew named Bona was tortured on the wheel for 4 days and 4 nights. It is the longest sentence of a person through this sentence. A 2019 archaeological find in Milan unearthed a skeleton, believed to have been tortured through this device. Now let's talk about the blood eagle penalty system. Among other ancient world barbaric methods of death, whether this form of torture is real or a literary invention has been hotly debated. However, the blood eagle ritual was first mentioned in late skaldic poetry. The executed would lie in a prone position and their backs would be slashed, their ribs separated from their spines, and their lungs pulled through the opening to form a pair of bloody wings. It's hard to imagine someone being alive to accomplish this. However, if the Viking sagas are to be believed, this technique is actually named as one of the most brutal, painful and, of course, dangerous ways to die. In real life in 867 AD, Ivar the Boneless, son of Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok, is reported to have turned King Ela of Northumbria into a blood eagle to kill Ragnar through a pit of live snakes. Next, we will talk about a method of punishment where molten gold is poured into the body and burned inside. The incredibly cruel punishment of drinking molten gold was practiced by the Romans and the Spanish on both sides of the Atlantic. Here the victim is held down, fried, and their mouths are forced open as hot gold is poured down their throats. The result is severe damage to internal organs and blistering of the lungs. In the end, he dies instantly. In real life, in 1599, native Indians of the Javaro tribe captured a Spanish governor and killed him by pouring liquid gold down his throat. And the Roman general and politician Marcus Licinius Crassus met this fate when the Parthians captured him. It is said that they did this to symbolize Crassus' thirst for wealth. When we get angry, we jokingly say that we will beat you. But did you know that the past has really come alive? This form of torture is largely due to its gruesome process. It was probably the most painful of the execution methods in the ancient world, probably because of its slow process. The victim is first stripped, and their hands and feet are bound to stop the burning. After this, the executioner begins to remove the person's skin with a sharp blade. Often this starts with the head, because this area causes the most suffering since the victim is still conscious. In some cases, parts of the person's body were even boiled to soften the skin and make it easier to remove. Time of death can also range from a few hours to a few days due to several methods, such as blood loss, hypothermia, or infection. In real life, a female philosopher named Hypatia of Alexandria was flayed by a Christian mob with shards of pottery. Finally, let's talk about the torture method called the Roman candle. Of all the other barbaric methods of dying in the ancient world, the Roman candle was the most brutal. Nero, the Roman ruler whose style of execution is filled with ruthless and psychopathic characters in history, was one such ruler. He hated Christians so much that he used people as torches for his garden ceremonies. First, the victims were tied to tall poles and nailed. Later, burning liquid was poured over them before being set on fire. The Padavalas have started the fire to prolong their suffering. Whether Christians rebelled against the state or not, this was a terrible way to go. It reflects how brutal punishments were in ancient times, and how they were often born out of man's evil ends and thirst for dominance. I am very interested to know if you have already heard of these cruel punishments. Apart from this, if you know any special information about this, please let us know. Finally, thanks for joining us. If the video is good, press the subscribe button and press the bell icon to watch such videos daily. And don't forget to share this information with your friends. Have a nice day and see you in a video like this.